So without further ado, let's welcome Pastor Bill Purvis.
All right. Thank you so much. Glad to be with you. And this is going to be a good time for us today as we talk about something that I think will be of help to all of you. Basically, I was looking the other week through Moses, the life of Moses, and I thought about, man, I need to share some leadership material about his life that I think all of us can benefit from. And so I call it Learning Leadership from Moses. I do believe he's one of the world's greatest leaders of all time in all of history. And if you look at his life, I think you'll agree. His biography is written there in the book of Exodus, and when you look through that book, it takes us back from his birth and even to the parents and how they lived and their journey, and then his journey as a little babe all the way to the king's palace, and then out of that into the desert, and then back into that where he's earning the right to lead. And then ultimately he's leading 3.5 million Jews to a place they've never been before. And when you look at it, almost every chapter about his life, the biography of his life that there in Exodus, almost every single bit of it has to do with leadership. It'll walk you through his marriage relationships and his conflicts and the people who came against him. And yet through all of that, you're going to see Moses and his humanity, but you're going to see him in his faith, and you're going to see him never losing really the sight of the purpose for which he was called. I even think it's so big that he's such a great leader, we ought to have kind of a Moses Monday every now and then where we close the post offices and perhaps we close the schools and we just celebrate the life of one of the greatest leaders. Maybe we ought to have a college class called Moses Leadership. But since we don't have any of that, let me give you some things I've learned about him, and I think this is going to help all of you, okay? So let's just jump right in, all right? Number one, these are called 7 takeaways from his life. Number one is everyone is created for a purpose. Everyone is created for a purpose. Everything in creation is done that way. Everything and everyone has a unique purpose. The sun was created for light and created for health and heat. Water and air were created for anything that's going to live, whether it's plant or a mammal or amphibian, whatever it's going. The sun, the air, and water were created for those things and their existence. Same is true for you and I. You are created for something. And we've often said the 2 greatest days of your life are the days that you're born and the days you know why. And when you can find out what your purpose is, it changes your attitude. It really changes your attitude about how you approach your job. You know, instead of now saying, I have to go to work, once you know your purpose, you say, I get to go to work. And so it changes a lot of that. It changes your attitude toward the way life is. A lot of things that would bother you won't bother you because it's not in your zone. It doesn't match where you're going. So you're able to then stay focused in where you are. So I think the main thing I would suggest is figure out, whatever amount of time that takes, to find your purpose in life. What am I doing, or what do I want to be, or where do I feel that my gifts and talents are? And then gear everything toward trying to help that. And here's the way I would do it. Everything that helps you to get toward your goal, and everyone that helps you to get toward your goal, is your friend. And anything that gets in the way of your goal is your enemy. And so if you can make it the good guys, the bad guys, the good things, the bad things, and say, I'm going to only focus on what I know will help me to fulfill my purpose, I think you'll get there a lot faster and find yourself fulfilled a whole lot quicker. So that's number one that I see from Moses' life. Moses realized at a time that his purpose was to be raised up to be the leader of his nation and take them out of slavery and into a promised land they were to go to. And he never really lost sight of that. He knew what his purpose was. Now, he didn't know it early on, but later when he found it, he grabbed hold of it and never let go. So that's one thing I take away from his life, is that he understood that we were created for a purpose. Now, the second thing, here's the second thing kind of jumped off the page, and this is one of those things you got to know as you grow. I've said this before in pastoring sometimes, and it's really important in leadership. Don't underestimate the power of palace training. That is, the environments that you've been in and the things you've been through, all of the things, maybe you're presently in something right now. Your palace training is what you're doing to prepare for the future that you're going to have one day. Moses was being trained for leadership, and he didn't even know it. See, Moses was that kid, the Israeli child, who there was a death sentence placed on them that they should die, and they were multiplying too quick, so the Egyptian ruler at the time, the Pharaoh, decided we got to kill all these little male boys. And so he was already born under a death sentence. Well, as a result of that, his family put him on this little basket and sent him down the Nile River and didn't know what would become of him. Or they watched and hoped and prayed. But you could imagine the agony in their heart. But behind that was a divine hand that knew all along that Moses had a place in life. His purpose would be to lead 3 million Jews. Now, in order to do that, he's got to learn leadership. He can't learn it from his dad at home. He's got to learn this from the new dad that's going to be put in his life, the Pharaoh. What better way to learn leadership than be raised in the home of the world's greatest leader? And so all along, if you look back at his life, you'll discover that every illustration and every experience and every adventure and all of those life things were meant for what he was going to use down the road. In fact, you're going to need, as you go further, you're going to need some things in your life that happened in your past, the wisdom you got from that. It's those little things and little jobs and little tasks that we think are annoyances. There's a scripture that says to us this: don't despise the day of small things. It's in the small things that your character comes out. It's in the small things that you begin to form your values. It's the small things that help you to get to decision making. And so all of those things are going to play a part later on down the road. Moses is going to learn a lot of things when he gets over there, by the way. In fact, to lead, that's why I say don't underestimate the power of your palace training. Some of you right now are in a place where you're being trained and you don't know why. This isn't the job you want to do. You're not in the place you want to be. But it could be what's going to help you to stay when you get where you're going, the things you learn now. Moses is going to learn some things now that he would need later. Being raised in Egypt, here's what he would learn. He'd learn astronomy. The Egyptians were the world's smartest people when it came to those things. In fact, they were the ones that invented the calendar we use today that has the 12 months division and then the 30-day division into the month. That was created by the Egyptians. Moses would learn astronomy there. He'd be educated in chemistry there. Their burial methods of Egypt are still unsurpassed today. They were far ahead and far advanced. Moses would learn those things in Egypt. He would learn art. They created some of the brightest colors that we've ever seen, and to this day, they are the ones that we attribute that to. He'd learn architecture. They were known for designs at that time that would impress the world. So the fact is Moses, even in those days as a young boy going through school, wondering why I'm having to be reared this way, why can't I be out playing with the other kids, doesn't realize that all of this palace training is going to be what he needs when he makes a connection one day down the road to lead. He's got to have some qualifications, some credentials in order to get some trust. So his life experiences, and that's what you have. Those life experiences are meant to prepare you for the day down the road. Now, Moses had a great formal education, but let's be honest, Moses was always an outcast. He never quite fit in. When you look at his life, you'll see he was a murderer. He was highly insecure. You remember when God had even called him to go and tell him to deliver Pharaoh, tell Pharaoh to let my people go and deliver the Egyptians, the Israelites from the Egyptian slavery? 4 times Moses argued with God. He said, who am I that I should go? That is, I'm not qualified. What can I say to them? That is, they're not going to listen to me. I'm just a shepherd. What if they won't believe me? He's saying, what if I get there and I give my most compelling argument and they don't even trust me or believe me? And then he came back to, I even have a stuttering problem. I'm not a good communicator. I'm not a good PR guy. And all he was doing was throwing up one thing after another of his way of avoiding the responsibility because he was insecure. And so Moses wasn't this total package that God used, but he had a purpose. And because he had gone through the palace training, God can overlook all those other things in order to get him there. And so he's got to learn to connect. Now think about the people he's got to connect with. I mean, you think, well, I'm going into a job and I got to lead these people. Moses had 3 million people he had to lead to a place they'd never seen, to trust a man they'd never known. And on top of that, they had what's called a slave mentality. That is, that they never thought like leaders. He had to think for them. They never had the ability to, because they didn't get a chance to think. See, they were raised in Egypt having been told, pick up this brick, put this here, lay that there. So they never got a chance to do anything that caused them to mentally break through. So he's got people who mentally cannot get where he needs them to be immediately, and he's got to lead them. Can you imagine what that's like? I mean, that's like herding cats. How do you lead a bunch of people that just can't think? There's no job he gives that they can't do. In fact, you recall that sometimes in his life, every time he left them alone, he had a problem. I'll come back to that later, but that's what he did. And so leading people that couldn't see where they're going, wouldn't see where they were going, that was very, very hard. But he understood now the palace training that helped me to watch how the Pharaoh in his own home, how that he handled people is going to come in real handy for Moses. Now he's going to learn how to handle people because he's been around that. So that's why some of you are playing in a role right now in a job that maybe you're not the chief, you're not the main, you don't get a chance to make the big decisions. The key there is not gripe about it and not always question the decisions they made. The key to being fulfilled and being who you need to be in the end is watching and observing how do they make those decisions? What do they do? What makes them come to that conclusion? What are they seeing that I'm not seeing? Learn all you can wherever you are. And as you do that now, that palace training will come in handy for you down the road. It's almost like playing on a team. You know, we may not be the main actor. We may not be the spotlighted player. But every one of us have a role. And if we will learn to play our role, don't compare yourself with the main actor. Don't compare yourself with the main player. When you do that, the team is being diminished. You know, as great actors as we know, you wouldn't go to see a play with only that one actor. Everybody else has an important role. That's what makes it all come together. So the goal is going to be for you to do some things. One is be the best in your role. Whatever your role is, just be the very, very best you can be there. The second is stay in your lane. If you know that's what your role is, you stay in that role. I have a guy that 33 years ago, when I first became pastor, I gave him a job to turn on a microphone and hand it to me every Sunday. He's been doing that 33 years. He didn't get out of his lane. He stays right there doing his one job. And it's a highly important job because I couldn't do what I do without him. But he's never worried about what everybody else does. And what they do may be more fascinating. It may be more enjoyable. But what he does is a specific job that he was called to do. And that's why I say, be your best in your role, stay in your lane, and then grow in your role. Grow in that role. Whatever that role is, learn all you can. Be the best that you can be in that role. I learned this years ago. There was a statement I heard made. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. What that means is if I resist learning and I resist growing and I'm not going to change and I'm going to refuse, then guess what? I get to keep that. That limitation that I put by not growing is going to remain with me forever. So I've got to be willing to say, let me break out. And here's a statement that you need to learn a lot early on. I could be wrong. You know, I could be wrong. We all think different. We are all different. I could be wrong. And be very open to the fact that I may not know it all. I may not know exactly what to do. I've heard it, seen it, but until I'm living there, I may not know. So I grow in my role by being able to constantly be teachable. And that's part of palace training. Let me give you the third thing I see that Moses did. Third one is this. I would say don't run ahead of God. If you look at Moses' life, he didn't do this one real well. This one, I would say, Moses probably gets a C in. Great leaders, by the way, always struggle with running ahead. Usually, you don't find a great leader running behind. He's always too far ahead and needs to throttle back a little bit. You remember Moses had that water in the rock issue. You remember where he went out and he was told to wait, to speak to the rock, but instead he struck the rock like he'd done it other times. It's easier for a take charge person to fire sometimes before they aim. And so it's highly important to say, okay, let me wait. Here's one of the things I learned in leadership. This helped me. I had to learn years ago to wait before making decisions. Now, generally, I can think of a decision pretty fast and come to the end of it, but I had to learn to wait. Give myself at least 24 hours before responding to the things that I'm not totally sure of. If I can do that, it gives me a moment to think about it. And sometimes we want to grow, we want to lead, we want to check it off. I've always said doing it right is much more important than doing it fast. So give yourself the time. Don't run ahead. God knows where you are. He'll get you where you need to be when the time comes. You just grow where you are in that role and be ready. The fourth thing that Moses teaches us is this one. Sometimes the people that you help will hurt you in return. That's part of it, okay? Some of you are going to lead, and you're going to take some people with you, and they're going to walk out one day. They're going to walk out of your church or out of your company or out of your business or off your team or out of your life. And if you're not careful, you will let that set you back. That's part of it. Moses goes to the top of the mountain one day, and when he gets back, he has total chaos. You feel like he's the guy that says, I can't leave you alone 5 minutes. He later leaves again, and when he comes back, they're ready to kill him. I mean, there's just always a conflict. Every time he took his hand off, those people just turned on him. Many of Moses' people, if you look at them, they were disloyal, they were ungrateful, they were users, they were consumers. Every leader at some point, at some time, has been and will be betrayed. That's going to be the big thing that you've got to embrace if you're going to grow. The growth issue is going to be here. Can I learn from betrayal? Can I live through it? And can I lead on anyway? See, many people I know stopped the moment they got a critical letter, the moment they got a threat by someone, I'm leaving the organization. They stopped, and they did everything possible to keep them on board or just keep them satisfied, and they listened to the wrong voices. They began to listen to the voices that said can't or I don't want to be a part of, rather than the voice that they had calling them to start with. And so if you're going to grow, you got to learn to handle the people that will hurt you. I was sitting with some politicians one night, and there was a new guy that was entering into politics. And I was going to introduce this man who was running for an office to these people who had already had offices, and I was just kind of bridge between them. And I remember one of my friends turned to the new guy who was up and coming, and he said to him this question. The question is not whether you can win this election. The question is, can you handle it if you lose? And he said, that's the part we see a lot of people that it never gets over. Now, what he means is their self-esteem was hurt, they put themselves out, and then hundreds or thousands of people did not vote for them, and they took it so personal that they never were able to recoup from it. And so the key is going to be this. You are going to get betrayed. It's going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen with the people you love the most or the people you trust the most, but it will happen all along your journey as you're growing. Learn from it, live through it, and lead on anyway. The fifth thing I learned from Moses. When I look at his life, and by the way, there's about 30 I could learn, but I want to pick up just 7 for us today. But the fifth thing I learned from this is leadership requires courage. You got to have courage to be a leader. That's one of the things that separates you. There was a time that 250 renowned men, the Bible says, challenged Moses. They came and they confronted him face to face and publicly in front of everybody else. And what I like is Moses stood very firm. He wasn't ugly. He was very humble, but he wasn't running. He stood firm and said what he wanted to say and stood his ground. And it tells me that not everyone will agree with you. Some will oppose you privately. Some will oppose you publicly. Regardlessly, don't be afraid. That's what he did that I liked. You're going to be faced with some hard calls one day. That's going to define your leadership. The hard calls are the times you learn to be strong. I've often said this, that you can't get success without taking risk and having courage. You will not succeed without taking some risk and having courage. You just have to. And then the other thing along that line under the courage issues is you will have to leave the safe zone at times. You're going to have to leave that nest at times where it's not safe, where it's not easy, and you'll be doing that all your life. There's not one price you pay. Some people think, well, I paid one price, and there I am. Okay, then where's my success? No, you pay it all the time. You pay it regularly. There's no stopping to it. You're always saying, okay, now it's time to make another change. If Moses had never left Egypt, if Moses had never made all the changes he made, he'd have never had the burning bush experience. He'd have never had the sea part in front of him. He'd never had hundreds of miracles happen. He had all that happen because he was constantly making the strategic big changes that he had to make to get where he was going. So leadership's going to call for courage out of your life. Courage is going to mean speaking up when you know you should speak up. Courage is going to be making the decision when it doesn't look popular. Courage is going to be doing the right thing regardless of whether it's enjoyable or not. No matter what the pain is, it's doing the right thing. And so that's what he has. And leadership that Moses teaches us is courageous leadership. The sixth lesson I learned from Moses. Great leaders have great focus. Now, if you study the traits of great leaders, they have some common denominators. You know, vision is always in there somewhere. Strategy is in there. Attitude, mission, all those are somewhere on the list. But the one thing you'll always find on every list of every leader anywhere, and I know because I've checked this, is focus. Great leaders have the ability to focus unlike other people. That's really what sets them apart. It's their ability to find that one thing and focus on that one thing, and they're oblivious to anything else except that one thing. That is their common denominator. Moses had the job of saying, okay, I got 3.5 million people around here with a slave mentality. I got to lead them across this desert. And the one thing they cannot do is stay focused. Every time he turned around, they were griping, they were complaining. But what Moses did was this. He threw away the rearview mirror. He said, this is where we're going. He knew we're not there yet. And so he continued to stay focused. You know why? Here's why. One is you got to believe in the mission. If you don't believe in it, then don't do it. You know, if you're working for a company and you don't believe in their mission, then why are you at the company? Why steal their check from them if you're not going to do the job for them? So you got to believe in the mission. And when you really believe in it, it makes all the difference in the world. So you believe in the mission. You believe in what the company provides, what the service that they offer is. You believe that. And then you stay on track, as we've said. And then you want to do this. This is giving excellence and attention to the small details. See, those leaders have the ability to walk in and see things that maybe others don't see. I walked in this room just a moment ago and picked up 5 things that have never been addressed, that are broken. And when I walked in, I said, oh, if I had a pair of scissors, I could fix that. If I had this, and I cannot help that. That's just the way I am. You leave me in your car long enough, I'll clean it up for you. Truth is you have to give attention to the details, to the small things. They're not trivial, but if you'll do that, it helps. And it helps everybody else to stay focused. So it's the giving excellence, it's the staying focused issue, it's believing in your mission. Those kind of things help to make the focus of what you're doing much better. And then number 7. Let me give you the last one here that Moses does. A growing leader knows the value of delegation and empowerment. They probably understand this one as well as anybody I know. In fact, show me somebody who's leading an organization that has a title and they don't understand this. Show me somebody that's leading one that's really leading. They get it. There's a value that comes to the whole organization when you learn how important delegation is and how important empowerment is. Now, delegation is not dumping work off on someone. It's not saying, let me just give you what I don't want to do. Delegation is giving people things to do that are in their gifting so that they can succeed and so that it frees you to do what's in your gifting so that you succeed. And that way, everybody gets the very best. Some people go to this extreme, they don't delegate anything. And some people go to this extreme where they delegate everything. Now, you have to determine what's to be delegated and what's not. But without delegation, you will never go far. Here's how to evaluate it. Ask yourself these questions. Do I work long hours after my regular job? That is, when everybody else is finished, am I still working? Now, there's some people that I say to them about them, they don't even work the hours they're there, okay? They quit by the time they came in. They never fulfill their 8 hours. But there are other people that work beyond that because they're just all in. And so the question is going to be, if I'm delegating right, am I working too many long hours after regular hours? Do I spend time doing someone else's job? That's the question that we have to ask when we go to work is, am I doing the job for other people that they're being paid to do? And if you are, then that's a problem on your end because you've taken on things that are not yours. The third is, do I have little time to do my main job? That is, am I so busy doing everything else that my main job is being neglected? The fourth is, do I do things that could be done by others? Have you ever looked at what you've got to do and said, you know, this doesn't have to be done by me? I mean, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. There are other people that can do this and probably even better. The fifth is do I have to be a part of every decision and every discussion? Some of the bigger things you need to be a part of always. You can't delegate that if your name is on it particularly. But you don't have to be a part of every little decision. You don't have to be a part of what they're going to do in areas that really are not a big deal to you. And so if you have a problem with delegation, sometimes it shows up in that way. And then the last one is, do I miss deadlines a lot? Always having to catch up. Someone who's, if those things kind of resonate and you say, man, that sounds like me, then that's the area that you can pinpoint now that I need to work on. It's the delegation. Now, how do you delegate? Let me just give you 4 ways. Number 1, prioritize your task. Figure out what goes first. When I write a list of all the things I have to do, I usually will put a 1 beside the top ones, a 2 beside what's important, 3 beside another. And I may write down a list of 30 items that I have to do, but then I come back and write a new list, and I change those numbers so that I know touch this first, touch that second, touch that third. And if I don't get to the others, at least I got the main things done. So prioritize your task. Number 2, pick the right person for the job. If you're delegating to someone else, then make sure that you match them with what the task is. If you put a person who is not gifted or good in an area, you're going to frustrate them, the mission is going to fail, and then it's going to land back on you. So the key is now finding the right one that can do this much better and that they are able to do that. The third is train the right person for the job. You may have to take somebody and sit beside them and train them. I had a lady years ago that she was doing some writing with me, and so I said, okay, here's how I want to work. I bought 2 magazines. I bought 10 magazines, but I bought 2 of each one. And I sat down with her and said, here's some articles I'm going to read. And I gave the same to her, so she's got the same exact magazine. I said, now I'm going to highlight as I read what speaks to me, and I want you to highlight as you read that article what speaks to you. And we did it through 10 different magazines. Now, the first week we came back, everything I highlighted that was important to me was nothing that she had highlighted. The second week, we came back with another article, and that time, we had 1 or 2 right. The third week, near the same. By the time we got to the 10th or probably the 8th magazine, truth is we were highlighting the very exact things. That was called training them to see the way you see. And so you train people for the job that you want done, and if you'll train them, they'll last a lot longer. And then number 4, here's one thing that people have problems with, that is put your ego aside. Some people don't delegate because they're afraid that other person may outshine them. They may make them look bad. They may get more attention or noticed. And that's a bad way to lead. The one thing that will get in the way of a leader's life is his ego. You have to be willing to say, they will do the job, and they'll do a better job, and I'll applaud them for it, and that's what I want. You have to learn to let the ego die and give them the opportunity to succeed. And that's why a lot of leaders are stopped at that place because they've never yet learned how to let other leaders rise up. Now, those are 7 ways and 7 takeaways that I get from Moses today. I believe there are a lot more of them, but those are at least 7 of them that if we try and we utilize those, we're going to find, I think, great value in our life. So my hope is that you'll take those things that I've given you and decide which one of those I can work on most and best, which one of those would give to me more benefit. You don't have to do all of them, but you have to do something that helps you to grow a little bit more each day. And growth is one of those things, it's not quickly, it's a long process. But if it's a daily process, you'll be a different person 365 days from now than you were today, simply because you began to apply some of those things with you. Now, I'm going to close in prayer for a moment. And I think BJ is going to come and share at the closing with us some things, and we'll do a question and answer. But I'm glad you're watching. I'm glad you're viewing. Thank you so much for doing it. I hope you'll tell other people about it as well, and I hope that you will decide to take what we do and don't just hear it, but apply it in your life. Let me pray for you, okay? Father, thank you for your grace and your love and the benefits we have of being able to learn to grow together. Thank you for the access we have now to be able to grow together in formats like this. I pray for everyone listening. God bless their life and guide them. I pray that you'll give them wisdom, and I pray that you'll help them to have a passion to grow and put the people around them that help them to see their best in their life. And I pray, God, that you will use them for even greater things than what they dream of. And for that, we'll thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.